Before I start to write this, I would like to say that I am going to write it in as impartial a manner as possible. I am not trying to discuss any beliefs either of us that experienced what we did had/have, but I will touch on it at the end. Take what I say with a pinch of salt. I am writing this report because it is something that I would never like to forget and really feel the need to get it out of my system and detail it as perfectly as I can. Thankfully, I have a very vivid experience of the events that occurred. It started recently when a mate of mine, Tom, was saying how he wanted to try Salvia Divinorum. I have tried Salvia on about 5 occasions in the past, breaking through about twice. I have always found it to be an utterly convincing experience, but have still remained pretty much on the fence, yet always amazed at the effects the chemical can produce. Last night, after acquiring 2 grams of 20x extract and smoking it together, I had an experience that quite frankly blew the others straight out the water. We decided to listen to something that we both love, Oliver Lieb LSG, Into the Deep, which is basically a flowing collection of epic soundscapes and down-tempo beats. Tom arrived at mine after work and I was feeling mildly stoned as I'd had a few joints earlier in the night. We decided to split each gram into 2 and use the bucket in my kitchen, gravity bomb to some of you, that we had just made with professional ease. The plan was for me to go first and Tom to follow. I slowly pulled myself a bucket and breathed it in, exhaling straight away. Tom shouted in horror that I hadn't held it in for 30 seconds, and for that one moment I felt like a total idiot. Actually, I think he made a sarcastic remark for me to enjoy doing salvia again, as I'd just completely wasted it, which looking back was really quite funny. I quickly pulled a second bucket to try and salvage the operation and felt the effects coming on pretty hard as I was doing so. I held in the smoke and that's the last thing I remember. Until that is. I'd been torn out of the reality I remember, and a voice told me that I was the millionth person, unsure on the exact number, to ever be called Michael Ross. It sounded like it was an announcement on a game show that I was the center of. I saw a gigantic name appear of all the different people that shared that same name over history, and they all assembled together slowly, weaving piece by piece and letter by letter into my name, me being the final installment. I felt like I'd been tricked and my life was a joke with such a pointless purpose, something for which I can't even begin to describe the feeling of utter disappointment. I couldn't move and I wasn't even in my body, wondering what to do, when slowly the name in front of me fell apart piece by piece. The final block was Tom, who I saw drop to the floor. I grabbed a hold of him because he was the only thing that I recognized, and it felt like a comfort for him to still be alive with me. I started to recognize that I was back in my own reality/house, but felt utterly alien and didn't want to go back. I grabbed Tom and pulled him up as he looked like he was in quite a bit of distress, and quickly took him to the living room. He didn't seem to know what was going on, so I told him that he was wrecked and I was just taking him to a better environment as he'd fallen over. He suddenly came round and said that the same thing had happened to him through there, although I now think that we had probably experienced separate things of a similar flavor at that point. It was at this point that Tom pointed at the wall in horror. There was what looked like a tear in reality which went really clear at one point to reveal a life-sized female entity on the wall. She told us that she was the Salvia goddess and asked us to help her. We were both visibly shocked and I wasn't sure if I could look at her. I still felt alien but completely clear-headed. She started speaking and I asked what I had to do. Thoughts flashed through my mind of trying to change the world. I was getting synesthesia off the music, I could visibly see it, which was coinciding with the Windows Media visuals on the computer right next to where she had appeared. As she spoke, the music came out in ethereal wisps of fractal patterns through her breath. It was one of the most beautiful things I'd ever seen. She started speaking to us, although I can't remember a lot of what she was saying. Tom got up and started walking towards the door, which was next to where she was. I felt like our lives had been made for this purpose, or that we really had to do something that she would ask of us. I thought that Tom was trying to leave because he didn't want to go through with it and was going to run away. I tried to stop him and he told me that she'd asked him to get her. I said that she said help her, and he said that she had been pointing to something in the kitchen. He led me over to where the bucket was and I got a feeling that I was meant to smoke the rest of the salvia but couldn't have ever went through with it. We went back and her figure had disappeared, but I could still hear her speaking. It was as if the salvia was wearing off and her voice was getting fainter, just supplying us with the music and singing for us. I was completely convinced. I told Tom I thought it was real and he agreed. We were sitting there visibly shocked and I thought our lives would never be the same again. I felt like my entire world had changed and was starting to massively question my concept of reality. He agreed. I was convinced it had happened and asked Tom again for confirmation. She had disappeared and her voice was gone. I could just hear some of the most amazing music I'd ever heard in my life, and it felt like she was providing it. Yet again I asked Tom if he thought it was real and he said it must have been the drug. Then her voice came back and started singing to us and telling us not to doubt her. I told him to listen to the lyrics and he looked as shocked as I did. I was saying, "Listen to it, she's speaking," and he was saying, "I know." I lay there in amazement. I couldn't believe what we'd both just collectively experienced. I had been so shocked, I felt like my life was a test, but then I realized that it wasn't and started to feel a glowing euphoria. At this point, one of only a few vocals that since checking are actually on the album in English, the rest are blissful foreign vocals, started to play. It still sounded like she was singing and the vocal repeats, "Give me your hand," it was all so fitting. Tom looked scared but said he was alright yet couldn't quite believe what had just happened. We both sat there, with me feeling very euphoric whilst listening to the music. I asked Tom yet again if it was real and he said it couldn't have been. Then another vocal started, which is actually a part of the album since checking, this time saying, "I am not existing, you hear my voice all over, the voice of everyone, another life, where you will never cry," followed by enchanting foreign vocals and the words "I am not existing" repeated throughout. I think that this really freaked Tom out at this point. I was equally as shocked but couldn't deny the sense of pure euphoria I was feeling. We lay back for a while and listened to the music, where every word seemed to fit so perfectly. Other things that I remember her saying were something about not being so bad and that she was powerful beyond belief. There was also something about knowing what to do when the time was there and that I knew I'd been there before. I got an intense sense of deja vu that I'd been there before the first time I did Salvia and broke through. I kept telling Tom to listen to the lyrics but he said he could hear them but didn't want to pay attention. It was like the soundtrack of the experience / my life and is quite possibly the most amazing thing I've ever experienced. One thing that I am sure of is that we both experienced this and Tom agrees. We heard her saying the same things and clearly both saw her. We both agree that it was at the very least a synchronized hallucination, which is amazing in itself. Either that or massive chance coupled with the drug suggestibility, or even at the most extreme a very much real encounter with some kind of entity / spirit / goddess. I think we both know how convincing it was, although it is quite a far out there thing to believe. I'm amazed either way and I feel really fucking good now. Either way I feel extremely lucky. I don't know what to make of it all, but whether it be the human brain or some kind of unexplainable thing, I find it equally amazing either way. Oh, and the album was ironically called In Too Deep. I think we were, in a good way.